Gentlemen, as we move into Trail 3 here, we need to think in terms of what does it mean to think like a knight? What does it mean to have that mind? And I thought maybe the easiest way to do that, instead of, I know you're all at Trail 3 now, I want you to take your books and go right to the front cover and just open up to the very first page of the front cover. It's what we call our Code of Honor. I'm going to ask you to have someone sign this, witness it for you by the end of this year's journey together. Just saying, hey, I see this in you. This is our code that we want to offer to those who would listen and receive it. Listen to these words. To the women who have longed for a world filled with knights, may they not be disappointed. May all women feel safe, respected, and loved by the men around them. To our daughters, may they recognize the difference between a male and a man, and may they find the latter. To our sons, may they see our knighthood and go on their own personal quest and take the journey of manhood further than we have before them. To the men who brought honor before us, we join you. To the males who brought disappointment, we offer healing. To a world in which we find ourselves, may you discover renewed hope, the courage to change, and the difference true manhood brings. It's interesting, as I ask you to think about having that signed, I would have had trouble signing that a few years ago. Matter of fact, I couldn't have signed it. I mean, I might have, because I might not have had enough integrity, to be honest. But the reality was that I've been a different kind of a guy in my approach to life. I was not a man who had the mindset of a knight. I didn't have that. I had a mindset of sort of self-pleasing. Let me tell you, I sort of was a warrior in the area of dating and then carried it over into my marriage, into sexuality. I was a warrior from this point of view. I would conquer, but it would be by permission. Here's what I mean by that. Instead of what we just read being part of our life, I was one of those people that would only go as far as a girl would let me. So when I started dating, when I was 14 years of age, it was as far as I could talk someone into, explain, push, do whatever I could, but it would always be with permission. Now, I would say I'm a conqueror by permission because it was about me. It was all about what I longed for, what I wanted. It was always about what would make me feel good. So what would happen is I'd play the game. You know the game, right? To find out whether they're interested. You put your hand out your side, you swing their hand by them. If they grab your hand, it's good. If you brush by their hand and they put their arms like this, it's not good. And if you're out here like this, they've left the state, it's over. You find this out. And you do that same thing with kissing. You do that same thing with each phase of sexuality. In fact, when I got married, I carried it over. I would see if Lynn was interested. I would sort of find out and sort of play the game. And if I got some kind of response, then I would move forward. It was always sort of conquering by permission. Now, we sort of as guys think that that's actually polite. It's kind of a nice way to do life, but it's so self-indulgent. There is very little knighthood in it. There's a lot of warrior in it because I'm conquering for me, but very little lover, very little friend, no king. And all of that. As a matter of fact, I would not be like this rope at all, in any way. See, there's a rope in our life that's woven around us. And I just have that opportunity in my life to be a different kind of a guy, but I'm not that man. I'm not that man. I used to be that man. That was the man I was, but something's changed within me. I want you to walk through trail number 3 with me. Trail 3 is the warrior's mindset. You know, when we look at the core of a man, we want us to think in terms of what is our mindset as a man. Now, you have 6 parts to your core, right? If you look at the dog tag that you have last year, if you are a graduate with us from Squire last year, you'll know you have body, soul, spirit, mind, shadow, self. And what you do with this is what kind of mindset you have is how you handle the mind area. Now, the reason we threw a rope up there is because on this rope behind me, you notice that it's all woven together and it had been cut at a certain point. And when it was cut, you could see that that rope was then unfraying. It was coming apart. Let's reverse that process. Imagine, if you would, that this strand of rope would represent what I'm going to trust myself with going off a cliff. There's no way. It's not going to happen. But if you do what I did with this and then weave it together, after a period of time, now all of a sudden that rope gets trusted. Now, I would prefer a repelling rope because I'm used to those. I know what that's all about. But to be honest with you, this would take me off a cliff. Why? Because we've woven them together. It's the difference when a mindset comes together as a man and starts to think in terms of the things that are important in our lives. I want you to consider this statement with me of a warrior's mindset from trail number 3. Read this with me if you would. The warrior utilizes the strength found in the mind of a man to round out his warrior nature. The mind has response patterns that contribute to the warrior's wholeness by providing him with the king, friend, and lover response alternatives. If you walk through that, you'll understand that we're saying that the part of a man that would just exist with just one strand, a conqueror by permission, is a warrior because I'm conquering. But there's no king, there's no friend, there's no lover, right? And so that strand is pretty weak by comparison. To be honest with you, there are one of two things you do as a man when you don't have your mind balanced well, when you don't have these strands all woven together. You either, as a warrior, become a destroyer, and that was me. My wife had gone through a very difficult, painful, abusive situation in her life. So guess who, as the warrior conqueror in her life, who enters into that world by permission, makes her feel devalued? I did that for a lot of years in my marriage. I did that with girls I dated. I did it with girl after girl. I didn't even care about her damage. I didn't care about what happened to her emotionally. It was about my conquering, right? You get it? One strand. So I was a destroyer. Now, if you as a guy don't deal with your warrior at all, if you ignore warrior, you'll find yourself to act like a wimp. You just don't, there's nothing you're fighting for. There's nothing worth protecting. You just are a guy that exists. It's just sort of just doing day after day after day into nothingness. So are you a destroyer or a wimp? Now, you don't have to be either. But in order for you to be that, you're going to have to learn to weave everything in together. King, warrior, and lover. Now, in order to do that, let's walk through this together. I want you to think about the nightly news that's sitting in front of you. Nightly news is that area of the Bible that we talk about, and where you find out about a guy that you probably have never heard of. This guy, I know you haven't. His name is Baasha. I can say his name because you wouldn't know if I said it right or wrong. This guy is a king of Israel. He actually reigns for Israel for over 30 years. This guy, from the day he started his reign, started killing people. He killed everybody in the house of Jeroboam. He killed all of his enemies, almost me. It's just assassination plot for assassination plot. That's how he became king. He assassinated the king before him. He will fight against the king of Judah. There's a king of Israel and a king of Judah. He will fight against the king of Judah, even though the king of Judah is a godly man. Baasha is not. He will fight against him so much that he weakens him against the foes that are fighting against the nation of Israel, right? Because the two are divided. Baasha was a guy that everything you read about him was a man that was just bent on destruction. Now, if you think about my rope, right? You think about this rope, it's not all woven together, it's just one strand. He's a warrior, and that's all he is. And Baasha is a man you don't want to be. And there's nothing good said of him. In fact, it says that he dishonored God. He did evil in the eyes of God all the time. A warrior, pretty good one, killed everything. But no king, no lover, no friend. Now watch what happens if you add into it king. Consider this if you would. Roman numeral 1, trail number 3. The warrior utilizes the king's response to provide input that encourages him to do some things. He's going to use the king response. He needs this part of him to be able to accomplish all that he's designed to do. Guys, if you do life as warrior, and that's where you are, this is the whole right, warrior clarity of the night, that's what this year is. If all you are is a warrior and you don't get this mind balance, this right mindset, you're going to leave damage. It's inevitable. So, here's what we do. Look at number 1. The warrior, this is going to encourage him to practice what he preaches. When a king is involved, he's going to practice what he preaches. What's going to keep you from becoming one of these two things? Either you're an abdicator, in other words, you come home, it's somebody else's problem. Lynn and I were at a friend's house that we had borrowed their house. It was up in the mountains, and we had borrowed this place. And I could not get the back door of the house locked. It was where all the valuable vehicles existed in the back of this place. And we had to leave, and I just couldn't get it locked. I had unlocked it, couldn't get it locked. And I'm getting a little frustrated, getting a little upset. And so Lynn says, "Are you okay?" And I go, "No, you lock it." And I walked away. That's an abdicator. Great, man. Very, very manly moment. I get so upset, I walk away. Now, and she does. I mean, the weird part about it, she did it in about 3 minutes and figured out what the little secret was that I couldn't figure out. But I abdicated. No king there, right? No king, no warrior. My warrior is terrible. My king is terrible. I've abdicated. Or what happens, guys, if you don't get this in balance, you become this tyrant. You start ordering everybody around. And there was a side to me that even as I walked away and I said, "You lock it." There's a side to me that had that side, and neither of which is appealing. So what happens, guys, if you are a warrior and you don't weave in king, you're going to have a problem. But if you're a king and you don't weave in warrior, you're having a problem, right? This has to be woven together. That's what the whole issue here. So look at number 2. Number 2 says, demonstrate the nobility, underline the word nobility, of his manhood calling. What this king does is it keeps us in the noble world. We need to be noble men of character, men of principle. It keeps us to understand that we got to behave nobly. Just think about yourself. We call the guy you don't want to be spandex male. Think of yourself in your boxers, your T-shirt, you're walking around the house. There is no nobility in that. It's just people getting sick, kids that are laughing at you. You hope your neighbors don't stop by. I mean, there's nothing noble about that. That's what we act like all the time if you're a warrior without king. You need the nobility of kingship, of adding into your life. It is understanding that I have a higher purpose. I live for more. Look at number 3. He is going to lead through sacrificial service. If you are a king, you will understand that sacrificing for others is everything. A good king is not one who comes in and says, "It's about me." A good king is one who says, "Everybody behind me feels safe." We use this phrase, when a man enters the room. You're going to hear me say that from time to time. And what should immediately usher into your mind when I say that is, when a man enters a room, the room should feel safer and better and more protected and more positive. That's what it should feel like when a man enters a room. Now, when a spandex male enters a room, he always degenerates it. A room always changes in mood when a man enters. Guarantee you, every time it changes. The question is, how are we changing it? It's what your warrior has woven in to king. Look at the next one. Number 4. Organizing his life according to a clear plan, specific goals, and personal accountability. One of the things that I love about us getting together in campfires is it's the accountability of that. We're going to weave this together with a plan and some accountability. And the more we work on this plan, the better off we're going to be, the better off we're going to function as men. So you know where you're heading. Kings know where they're going. They just do. They have a plan in mind. And as I work through the different journeys of my life, I've been amazed at watching men who have done the same. I have this friend whose wife has left him for another man through a gym. It's really interesting. I don't know what it is about gyms, but in the last year, I know of 5 guys that lost their wives to men in gyms. And I think it's because predators prey there. And I think it's sort of what happens. And this guy is kind of sharing with me all of his struggles, all of his journey, and it's interesting. I've watched him step by step plan how he will, 1, do everything he can to rescue his wife. I've known him long enough now that rescue attempt has failed. She chooses to continue to trash her existence. So I've watched his plan in protecting and caring for her, not enabling, but protecting and caring. And everything about it screams nobility. This guy now is divorced, not of his own choosing. Not with his wife anymore. She's with another man. Not of his own choosing. And he's handled it with step by step as a king. He wove his desire to go punch a guy's lights out, right? That's the warrior. And he wove it with king. He did, by the way, have a face-to-face encounter with that guy, with 2 other friends with him as well, and warned him about the consequences of continuing with his wife. But the reality is that in that process, this man has functioned like a king. Warrior woven together with king. Look at the next one. Number 5. It's going to encourage him to respond rather than to react to a crisis. It's going to encourage him to respond, not react. That's so important for us, guys. We have to learn to respond, not react. King is that side of you that kind of filters through all the noble things you need to do, not just all the reaction things you need to do. So when you work through this, you're going to stop your reacting and you're going to start responding. Number 6, we will treat people fairly regardless of what they can or cannot offer him. Remember how we talk about how we're going to serve others? It's all about caring for others. Whether somebody can give you something or not, you will treat them fairly. There is nothing more noble than that. My kids always give me a hard time when I down anyone, whether it's verbally or in an attitude or whatever else. They give me, you know why? Because it looks and feels so ugly. You and I have to be very, very careful about not valuing people, whether or not that person can do something back for us or not. You want to do a good measuring of a man? Let's say you're sitting here right now and your life is just really messed up right now. If you walk into a room and you value others in the room and not just make it about you and your messed up life, but you value others in the room, even though they can't offer you anything to solve your problem, you've hit a level of knighthood that's extremely impressive. And with that mindset, we'll change the world around us. Look at number 7. I respect all authority. Respect all authority. That is understanding that our choice is to say, there is authority over me, I will respect it. It means you change your attitude towards police officers, even when they pull you over, just because they have to make their quota. The reality is you get the attitude that says, I will come in and I will value people and I will respect those in authority over me. Kings do that. Kings who think they just rule, it's all about us, we're just warriors out of control. That's what a gang member is. We are guys that will say, okay, I get this understanding of how things work. Therefore, number 8 makes sense, and that is govern his own behavior. He's going to govern his own behavior. If I'm going to respect authority, that means the government and all the authority above it. It also means I'm going to govern my behavior so I'm not challenging authority all the time. How are you doing in that area? How are you doing in the aspect of, do you say, well, I can cheat on my taxes just a little bit? Or if nobody sees me, I can do this particular event. By the way, stealing something on a computer online is no different than stealing something from the store. We get those things all the time in our life. How are you doing governing what you're doing? The kind of model and example you are. When you get this stuff put together, you get this, how am I doing? All right, now take a minute and just think in terms of this. Are you a strong king? Are you a weak king? Are you strong? If your king is strong, you're looking through these things, pick out the one that you go, I'm really good at. Go through the list, all of them, and to say, of these 8 items, which one do I score well on? I do really good, by the way, in lead through sacrificial giving. I lead through sacrificial service. I do that one really well. You know what I do really bad? Put a plus next to the one you do well. Whatever yours is, write it down. Just put a plus next to it. You know what I do bad? I don't govern my own behavior very well. Now, I don't do things that are illegal or anything like that. What I tend to do is when I get tired, I go to self-care, taking care of myself. And so I put a negative one next to that. How are you doing in king? Put a plus next to the ones you're doing well. Put a minus next to the ones you're not doing well. We'll do that for also friend and lover as well. I want to talk about an interesting man who was a very good king. His name is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, believe it or not, died at 32. And yet he did all that he did. I mean, traveled 20,000 miles, was gone for 12 years. He was a warrior's warrior. He actually was a king's king, too. He spent a lot of time with his men, cared, encouraged them before battles. Very wise king. He would go into a battle and never do a battle the same way twice. He'd always do something different. And whatever it took, one time he had a battle against Tyre, and he didn't want to do a water war. So he decided, because it's just too hard to come in from the sea, so he built a sort of like an island of just debris and stuff that was 200 feet wide, 2,000 feet long, patiently over 7 months to attack the city of Tyre. When he was fighting against a commander in, I think it was India, he literally just demonstrated, almost like if you know the story from the Bible about Jericho, he would march around the city, yell and scream like they're going to attack and never attack. And he did that for day after day after day after day until the city got lax and he attacked it and took it over. Alexander the Great was one of those men that through all of his background, through all of his life experience, became a leader very young. He became a ruler very young. Obviously, if he ruled for 13 years, he died at 32, you get a rough idea how quickly he became that. He was an amazing king. However, his army grew weary of being away from home and started to show mutiny signs near the end of his life. We're not sure if he was poisoned. We're not sure how it all happened. But we know that there was a process where he just started losing his army's loyalty. You don't want to know why? Because he didn't let them be lovers. I mean, they're just warriors, right? He was this king, warrior, no lover. Not a whole lot of things about Alexander the Great and lover. And he also wasn't a great friend. Just didn't have any. I mean, he was always in the conquering world. He was always doing things. In a few minutes, I want to show you a quote from Alexander the Great that I think will help you understand this defeated side of him. But I want you to see what it means to be a true king, a true warrior, but also a true friend. Roman numeral 2. The warrior utilizes the friend's response to provide input that, okay, these are the things that you're going to get input from when you do this. And it's why we call men, I call men up to knighthood. We don't call women up to knighthood, we call men up to knighthood, because in their true warrior, one of the things they're going to need is other men to join in the fight with them, and in so doing it, they're going to find themselves accomplishing tremendous tasks, tremendous freedom, all because they will not do it alone, but in group, as friends. A couple things you want to understand with this. Number one, if you do this, it's going to encourage team building. Encourages team building. You need friends, you're going to have a team. Men that are going to share in your life. I need men doing life with me. I have 4 key leaders in my life who pour into me, and when I go through the rough times, they're there. You that took Squire know that I've talked about those men specifically in my life. Jesus Christ had 12 men who followed him around. They're called disciples. And Christ said, I need to have team building. It's very important that we do teams because to be a warrior, you can't do it alone. To be a king, you're going to need to have guys that understand what your moral high ground is. You're going to need to do things in teams. Friends are extremely important. If you fail to do this, you tend to become users. Look at number 2. Helps in self-discovery as a result of feedback of others. If you want to understand yourself, you underline that word feedback. If you're going to understand yourself, you're going to need to have input from others. And if you don't, you become users of people. You just sap everything out of them. You get no feedback as to how it's going, and you just kind of do a lot of damage. And there's a lot of men who are users. And if you're not a user of people because you're doing it alone, you become alone. You hit this moment in your life where no feedback, and you're just doing life all in a bubble, all alone. So you're either alone or a user, and neither of those are pretty, so you got to find a balance. You take your king, and you weave it into warrior. You take your friend, and you weave it into that. And that's when the rope starts to get stronger and stronger in your mind. It's the mindset of a knight. Look at the next one. 3, he improves his relationships, underlying relationships with those around him. This is the guy that you don't get along with. You know that guy? You're going to have relationships with guys around you. You're going to learn to do things that are hard as men. One of the things you learn to do that's hard is to value people, all people, and even when you don't get along with a guy, just learn to value who and what he is. I think sometimes that's an issue that we struggle with. The struggle that we have is I think sometimes we look at guys and we go, I can do without this guy, or I can do without that one. Well, the reality is, you know what? Knights think in terms of everyone needs protection unless they're an enemy, and then everyone needs protection from them, but they don't underestimate anybody coming along. Look at number 4. It's going to redefine relationships as the true measurement of success, because, and we're going to give you several reasons. That word success, he's going to redefine his relationships as the true measure of success. When you understand what a friend is, you're going to start to say, that's what's important. These are the things that I need to have as part of my existence. These are the things that, when all else fails, is what I'm measured by. And it is relationships. Guys, when you start to play with this particular rope in your life, it is going to be adding relationships with males that make a huge difference, because as you start to move forward, you'll find the strength of who you are increases with the number of relationships. Look at a couple things underneath that redefinition. A man's worth is based on the type of relationships he establishes with those close to him. You need to understand that God thinks you're valuable. The God of the universe thinks you're valuable. He establishes a relationship with those he wants to be close with. You want to be close to him. That demonstration of friendship is so important to us that we need to look at each other and say, is this person of worth, of value? It values those around you. And it's funny, he values, look how it says it. A man's worth is based on the type of relationship he establishes with those who are close to him. It's going to be interesting as those who seek, God says, I want to love you back. By the way, he wants to love you even if you don't seek him. There's something about us valuing and building deep relationships, but it doesn't stop there. Look at the next one. A man's legacy is seen after his death by the type of influence he remains in someone's life. You're going to see what kind of legacy you leave, what kind of areas of your life come from this whole development of this friendship area. Legacy is how you're remembered. And how you're remembered is, based off of what you've valued. And relationships are what doesn't pass. Relationships are what matters. It's where generations come from. There's certain things that a man does, but those are nowhere near as important as what a man is. The last one to look at is a man's faith reflects the nature of God to those who pass by him. A man's faith reflects the nature of God to those who pass by him. In essence, you're going to understand that where you're going to see God alive in me is going to be in how I operate in friends and valuing people. My faith will directly reflect this. So as you redefine yourself as a friend, it's like you take this one now, you say, okay, I'm going to weave these in. Now, where are you strong and where are you weak in the friend area? Okay, I got my warrior, I'm weaving in my king. Now I have this friend area. Where am I strong? Well, for me, I'm strong in my relationship with God. And so my relationship with God helps me to define value in people. So it's changed a lot about how I view people. I stopped using people. I stopped just being all about me. I mean, things changed with him because that's who he is. That's what he was like for you. Where's yours? Where would you put a plus in all of these areas that we just went through? Where's the one that works really well? For me, it's interesting. As I walk through these, my negative comes in the fact that I do not do self-discovery as best as I should. Not real good in that one. Let me give you a quote, though, from Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had one friend that was of note. He was the treasurer. And Harpalus will actually rob him, will actually be an embezzler. Alexander the Great's off doing his thing. Harpalus will turn. I think it's out of this that Alexander the Great made this quote. I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. What he's saying in this particular part of this quote is he's saying, this man who betrayed me was my real enemy. When I get a real man leading something, he'll make all kinds of people will follow him. Harpalus had no one follow him. He was just trying to be a sneaky embezzler. This betrayal left him wounded and hurt, but it also caused us to understand something in this quote. Even Harpalus was not his greatest enemy, because Alexander the Great was not a great friend. He said the greatest enemy is the one who have those who follow him, king, warrior, and has men that are loyal that will follow. That lion scares him. That lion is the one that causes him to stop and say, that's my whole life defined. I'm the lion, king, I'm a warrior. Not a very good friend, and certainly not a very good lover. There's a scene from a movie. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Australia. It's kind of this epic thing. It's a little bit of a chick flick kind of deal, but it has some, things get blown up, so it works out a little bit. It's based in Australia. It was before the Second World War, and then goes into the Second World War. And it's about Lady Ashley who comes to live in Australia, and she really has no business there, but there's inheritance. Her husband had been killed. She gets there. He's dead, and then she meets this guy who sort of handles her cattle called Drover. And Drover is the guy that they sort of fall in love. And then there's an Aboriginal boy who they had sort of adopt who has no family named Nala. And it's kind of this cool story. As the movie moves forward, closer and closer to the war, there's this amazing scene that I want you to think about. The scene is where Nala is being pulled away from Lady Ashley and being taken to this island, while all the other children of Australia, all these other children of the area are being taken away in ships to a safe area where the war won't come. Nala is being taken to a little island called Radio Island. Radio Island is where the radio is, where the Japanese will bomb when they attack. She screams and doesn't want to let go of him, and he says, I will sing you to me. It's an Aboriginal term. I will find you. You listen for me. Don't let me go. It's very, very emotional stuff going on. As she runs into the evil guy, Fletcher, who's just bad guy. There's always a bad guy and everything. She has an encounter with him right after she's separated from Nala, and he's trying to make a deal with her. And there's so many painful things that go on in this scene. Meanwhile, Drover's not there. Drover's off in the back country, doing his thing with a good friend of his. In that discussion, that good friend of his confronts Drover, and he says these words. He says, you have no love in your heart. And if you have no love, you have no dreams. You have no life. That scene is one of those scenes that cause us to think in terms of, is that me? Am I a guy that is not a lover? All I am, I might be a good friend, and Drover was a good friend, and I might be a good warrior, very good warrior. Might be a good king, a little weak in king area, but he had some moral conflict. But if there's no love, there's no dream, there's no life. It's that understanding that causes us to say, then I'm not complete in my mindset if I don't get all four of the strands of the rope together. So let's look at lover. Let's look at lover. By now you've evaluated how you are as a king, plus minus, how you are as a lover, plus minus. As a friend. Let's take a look at lover. Roman numeral 3. The warrior utilizes the lover response to provide input that will do the following. Okay, he's going to use this lover response to provide input that will do this. Number 1, gives him the key to reach his optimum potential. You want to hit all that you're designed to be. You want to hit your optimum, your maximum potential. This is it. Now, if you are not doing well with lover, I can tell you one of two things are true for you. Either people call you cold, especially women, call you cold, or you find yourself being very critical. That's what happens if there's no lover in you. Kind of act this way that is not what you're supposed to be. You're going to need the lover in you, the passion in you, that which longs for others, not to use. And by the way, this is not necessarily a term that has anything to do with sexuality. This is not like he's a great lover. This is that I so value, and so in many respects, the heart that wants to create that which is loving for others. An environment which is pleasing. Not for you, but for them. You want to hit your optimum potential? You have to deal with lover. Look at number 2. He exercises his identity to love others, necessitating the following. So underline love others. Okay, these are things. I'm going to kind of rapidly walk you through these. He's going to understand the respect of self. You have to understand what it means. If you're going to be a lover, you're going to have a respect of self. That's very important. If you don't respect you, you're going to run into a little bit of problem. Look at the next part. He's going to have self-discipline. Self-discipline. So not only do you have respect of yourself, you're going to have self-discipline. And self-discipline, these things, if you ignore them, if you don't have them as part of your life, you're going to be empty. You can only give what you got. So if you don't find yourself valuable, and you don't discipline and care for yourself, you're going to be in trouble. So when you look at this rope, there's parts of this that you got to make sure it's a good rope. You got to make sure it's what it needs to be before you weave it in. But it's going to necessitate not only that you are a respect of self and a self-discipline, you have to be self-valuing. Because if you don't value yourself, well, you're not going to value others. So self-valuing becomes extremely important. So as you do that, I value who I am. I have discipline. I think that what I am is worth something. Then you also have to be willing to know this, that you have to be willing to forgive people. Part of this is a willingness to forgive. If you don't have a willingness to forgive, you and I get into so much trouble in this area as a lover. So many of you have been hurt by people that you tried to love. That's caused you, maybe it was your mom. Maybe it was your dad. Maybe it was your best friend. Maybe it was your wife. Maybe it was an old flame. Something happened along the way that caused you to say, wow, I'm not sure I'm worth something. You got to forgive, or it's going to eat away at you, just take you out. We can talk about that one later on. Look at number 3. Creates loving acts instead of just words. It's easy to say, I love you. He creates loving acts instead of just words. If you and I are careful about the things we say, we're doing okay. But if you're more careful about the things you do, you're now weaving this the way it needs to be woven. It works out so much better. Look at number 4. Understands the importance of establishing trust by creating deep personal bonds. He understands the importance of establishing trust. And what you're going to do when you establish trust is you can count on me. See, there's something about this rope coming together that you should be able to pull on it and it'd be okay. Here it is, all locked in. You can trust me. That becomes that which is part of the lover, which is this. I make love to only one woman, my wife. I am not going to be unfaithful. She can trust that. I will be my son's dad, whether they reject me or not. They can trust that. I will love God, whether it feels today like he loved me back or not. It is trustworthy. That's what the journey is of lover. Look at number 5. Uplifts love as a single highest human value. The singular highest human value that we have is love. If you lift that up, say that's the highest one. Everything else, I mean, come on, think about it. Victory, everything else. Nobility, everything else. Relationship, everything builds around the idea of, do I value, love that person? That's the highest singular thing. Where does love come from? The source of love is God. So my connection to him will so open up this whole area in my life and give me a degree of freedom. Look at number 6. Therefore, it reflects the nature of the God-man relationship by participating in a committed marriage and valuing his family. One of the things that's so cool about this whole area is that I value so much my relationship with God that it teaches me how to value my relationship with my wife. Make love to one woman, right? I am so connected to this individual that they can be confident that I am demonstrated the total, what a knight is. Everyone that comes behind feels safe. That brings us to the final one. Final one is this. The warrior, when he utilizes his lover response to provide input that honors God by using Christ's sacrificial example of love as a model to those around him who God also loves. This is kind of an interesting one. What this is it's letting Christ, who's a sacrificial lover, whether you know Christ or not in a relationship with him, the fact is it's kind of hard to miss that he's a sacrificial giver. What he does is he says, I will die in your place. That's pretty sacrificial. Christ is the model that frees us up. If he's dying in my place, what does that mean? Well, for me to live, I'll live through him. So I'll reject my sinfulness and accept his purity. It's this amazing thing. It's a sacrificial gift. How do I learn how to love? I really learned it by watching God love me. For God so loved this entire world that he gave his only son. Whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. An amazing word. He says, I want to give you life. That's what he does. As you think through weaving this rope together, as you think through what does it mean, it always ends up with, who's the maker of the rope? God. Really, the rope of my mind and all the parts, king, lover, warrior, friend, all demonstrated in God. Every once in a while, when you're watching a movie, you see that all sort of come together. In that movie, Australia, that I was talking about, we're getting near the end of the movie. Drover believes that Lady Ashley was killed because the office she was in was hit by a direct attack by the Japanese, and he was told that she was dead. He had come back to try to find her, come off the outback where he was challenged to truly love, to truly dream again, to truly live, and so he came to find her and she was dead. At least that's what he was told. But he was also told that Nala was on the radio island. I want you to consider this particular scene as you think through what does it mean to be a mindset of a knight. The scene unfolds with him on a ship going on into this island, rescues the kids, gets them onto the ship at the loss of his best friend. Everything kind of crumbles, everything kind of falls apart. But Nala's rescued, and all the other kids that were sent to Radio Island were rescued. As he's bringing them back into the blown-up harbor, having been hit by the Japanese, and everything is smoke is rising up, and ships are sinking into the harbor, buildings are destroyed, fire still being fought by firefighters. As they come in, Nala begins to play on a harmonica a song from a Wizard of Oz movie about a rainbow. As he plays that song, and the other boys on board begin to sing another song, and the two of them come in harmony. Lady Ashley, who is not dead, getting ready to be board a ship and be taken away from the area, thinking Drover's dead, thinking Nala's dead, suddenly hears the music. And she goes racing down to the dock. And Nala sees her, comes running off the boat, runs up and grabs her. I sang you to me, it's so powerful. And he says, Drover found me. And then she realizes that a knight, king, warrior, lover, friend, had rescued all that was important to her. Nala and her heart. Gentlemen, the mindset of a knight is the weaving together of a very strong rope. And when you have it woven together, king, lover, warrior, friend, you and I have a chance to change the world around us. See you next week.